Hey guys, today I have this video from AutomaticJak. He makes awesome videos about WoW that is called Blizzard Needs to Rethink Mythic Plus in the World Within. This title of course caught my attention because I have been making videos like this one, or well, I don't know what he's going to say, but like revolving around that title, right? So of course I wanted to watch it, so let's just do it. Let's see what he has to say. Let's see if he goes in line with what I've been saying or he has some other ideas. But with the base statement, which is Blizzard needs to rethink Mythic Plus, I completely agree. So let's see.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Jack. Going into the War Within, they made really big changes to Mythic Plus, and Challenger's Peril being one of them. I think they really have missed the mark in terms of what they're actually kind of doing to the player base in the process. So in Dragonflight, there were a lot of times, especially Season 3 and Season 4, running with some of the Exodia comps that you had there, you could really like steamroll keys up into pretty high levels without really respecting a lot of the dungeon mechanics. And so, as they even write right here, they want Challenger's Peril to emphasize precise play and greater risk on player decisions as they progress through higher keystone levels. So they say, hey, we want to give you some breathing room, not make it as punishing, but we still want this initial goal of precise play to come into effect. Now, the issue is that in Dragonflight, you didn't have this penalty and you could rack up like 20-something deaths in certain dungeons and still time it, which felt really weird for a timed event, especially with runbacks involved as well. But a lot of people really enjoyed being able to kind of like steamroll keys up until they got into a high level. The problem was that you would have a really huge mix of players where you didn't really understand if this person with this IO or this person with the same IO actually knew the dungeon mechanics. And so what they've built...
I use Jack's videos for learning this in Dragonflight. He's really good. Yeah, bro, he's really good. I like him a lot. And yes, he's great with healers, right? Because he's a healer. That is awesome.
Built in the War Within is like this big wall, especially at 12s, where the health, the damage are all really high, which makes the players have to be even better at their classes, even better at their specs, really in order to make it over this wall, in order to really progress. But because of the infinite nature of spamming Mythic Plus, where as long as you can find a keystone, you can just keep on playing the game, you don't really have that improvement that Blizzard's trying to force upon the player base. You kind of just have people smashing face into the dungeons, and as players continue to improve, they also get a lot more exclusive. So way back in Legion, when Mythic Plus first came around, on NA, there was a pretty vibrant Discord community.
Yo, Rizzo, bro, my dude, how you doing? Yo, Ninja Stuart, brother, how you doing, guys? How you doing? WoW is down right now, so I said, you know what? Since WoW is down and I want to stream, I am going to start playing RuneScape, and we are here in the tutorial island.
Community that was really looking to like get people together to start doing Mythic Plus dungeons. And then over time, that community basically just fell apart because people started getting more and more exclusive. Before the 0.1% title really came along, people realized that there was, a handful of the total player base that they could progress into the highest dungeons. And so it became more about getting onto people's friends lists and getting into that networking to find.
Which is annoying. I don't like doing that. I don't like doing that. Yes, I know that, it is an MMO, you have to talk to people, but I am one of those guys that I just like getting in a group. I say hi or yo, and that is everything that I say. And at the end of the dungeon, I say, GG, well played, and I am out. That is all that I want to do here. I don't want to be adding people or talking to people. I know it is an MMO, but well, maybe, like talking stuff about the dungeon, like lost in here, let's pull in here, let's take this route, let's interrupt this guy, focus this guy, maybe stuff like that. But I don't want to be friends with these random guys.
Find those elite groups to continue sort of progressing. Now, that kind of got broken up into a bunch of different tiers, not just in the 0.1%, but also in like the 1%, where people would very rarely want to like pug somebody. They'd very rarely want to pug somebody, only kind of play with their friends, and more people started kind of shifting to that over time. This is kind of what's happening right now in the War Within Season 1, from what I've seen, is that dungeons over 12 are having not huge amounts of people looking around in groups in LFG, and
And of course, AutomaticJak is a high-end player, right? So they think about keys like 12. But what I am seeing for me and for a lot of players and more casual players is that 8s or 9s are already a wall. You already, it is hard as a DPS, and more or less if you are not a meta class, to get invited to keys even at the 7 or 8 range. And if you just play a few hours a week and you want to have fun and progress your character, it is really hard to pull off right now in this season. And again, some people will say, get good, or you shouldn't do content that you can do, and you suck, and you have to put the time to do difficult content or whatever. It wasn't like this in Dragonflight. In Dragonflight, the journey was a lot smoother, and you could, if you kept progressing, you could progress. The thing is that right now you hit a fucking wall where even if you want to, it is hard to overcome it.
You're having a lot of players really just getting like slammed at that 12 level, and it might change a little bit thanks to this Challenger's Peril affix, but I think a lot of people get like really hard gated at the 12 because of the jump up in difficulty and the fact
before 12, brother. After 7, when you get the Challenger's Perils, yeah, you get gated right there.
that the game doesn't really teach you how to get better. There's 3 main factors that you really have to balance in Dungeons over 12s. That's doing enough damage, especially with the tank nerfs that were kind of put in this expansion. Tanks don't live forever. They have incredible tankiness. But, you know, when I play with VDH, there's times where if the pack doesn't die in X amount of time as we're trying to do a pull, that he will just melt, right? Or he has to be forced to kite or something along those lines. The damage checks get really high, especially as you start ramping up in keys over 12. The healing checks ramp up very quickly, as I'm sure a lot of you have noticed from our channel, especially when you're pugging and casts go through. And the third factor is the crowd control element. And so all of these things really get pushed upon you as you go into higher level dungeons. And I would argue, since the War Within has put together, or actually Dragonflight to be honest, has put together all these talent nodes, we have more abilities really than ever before that we have to take advantage of. You have things like kick, obviously, but it used to be that healers didn't actually have kicks. You know, you have all of the crowd control, thunderstorms, stuns, you have a variety of dispel formats that you have to master, and a lot of these are not new, but having all of these together is also having Blizzard balance around having all of these things. For example, I know this is HPS logs, but the range is really what I want to highlight for some of these Warcraft log statistics, is that, you know, you'll see specs like Disc Priest have incredibly wide ranges. Things like
look at this graph. This graph, of course, shows that there are better classes than others, but the difference is not that big of a difference. You could make it work with the worst class, in quote, worst, because it is not that bad. But the perception of the community is skewed that no, you have to take the 2 top, right? The 2 best ones, you have to take those. And that sucks.
Totemic Shaman have...
What expansion do you recommend to play? There is so many. Oh, you have right now the classic WoW. For Cataclysm, you have the Season of Discovery. You have the Hardcore WoW, and you have the World Within, which is retail, the actual one. That is the one that I like the most, retail WoW. The World Within. I believe that is the coolest one. It has the most stuff to do. And it is the current one, like the most updated. Listen, let's trust this WoW season and go hardcore grind on let's go escape till next season on WoW. Brother, you have been noticing that my playtime in WoW has been going down because of this. Because it is not fun to progress your character right now. So my playtime has gone down. Like in Season 3 and Season 4 of Dragonflight, I used to play 2 or 3 characters, and I completed like AOTC in each one of them, so like doing the heroic raid, and I got like 2500 rating in each one of them, and I got the Mythic transmog in each one of them. I was enjoying the game a lot. And this season, my playtime has gone extremely down because of this, because it is not fun progressing your character, because the main way to progress your character, let's be honest in here, is to Mythic Plus, and you hit a fucking wall, and it is not fun. Yeah, true, I always look up to him, you to kiss, and I see all of us, so I leave you alone. Yeah, brother, yeah. And some days it is like today that today I was going to play WoW, but the server was down, so I decided to play RuneScape, right? But also because last few weeks it was like the launch for Diablo, and I was excited, but I already did everything that you can do in Diablo, so that is why now my playtime in Diablo has gone down. I am excited for PoE 2 coming in December.
Widely been viewed as easier to play, so they have a little bit of a smaller range. But we never really get data to show the range with which people use their kicks, their stuns, their interrupts, their defensives. There's not these statistics on these things, but it really only takes you pugging a couple of times to realize that there is an incredibly massive delta between people who are using those abilities and people who are not. And since Blizzard designs the game around them regardless, you can have some enormously frustrating experiences. Just like in our previous videos where we've talked about the problems with healing and Dragonflight being based off of having so many defensives that you basically have to have a defensive up for every major mechanic in order to survive, so too is the game being designed around all of the additional crowd control that continues to get added over time. Having more resources than ever to unlock all these abilities also means that Blizzard wants to challenge players and make it so that they have to use every single ability in order to make sure you're having more successful runs, or just about, or having like almost all the people taking advantage of those things. And what you really have noticed over time is that there's not a really good way for the game to teach people how to utilize these mechanics. For example, we had like...
The thing is that, and I am not using this as an argument, like it is fine this way because you guys know that I hate this argument, but the thing is that it has always been like this. Like WoW, like since I started playing in Shadowlands, they don't teach you shit. You have to learn this stuff by yourself, watching videos, Wowhead, and just by playing the game. That doesn't mean it is good. In fact, this is one of the biggest criticisms towards WoW, that after you level up and you go into end-game content, the difficulty spike is insane and you have to learn a lot of stuff. So I am not saying it is good. I am not saying, oh, it has always been like this, so it doesn't matter. No. But I am using this argument to say that this is not the excuse of why this season is bad. Because Season 3 Dragonflight, Season 4 Dragonflight were good seasons, and this was the case there too. So while it is true that this is wrong and this should be improved, it is not the reason why this particular season sucks, at least in my opinion.
The Exiles reach as new players are sort of getting into the game, but since it's not involved in endgame content, a lot of people were just kind of skipping ahead, boosting ahead, and then just progressing on throughout the regular game. I'd also argue since Delves have existed, they've sort of made a progression path more focused towards casual players, and the Mythic Plus and like raid environments are really focused towards what I would call competitive players. Like, I think in general, a lot of casual players are going to play the game a lot. They might even play as much as competitive Mythic Plus or competitive raid players might, but their emphasis is going to be not so much on let me push out as much damage, as much healing, as much whatever. They still want to improve their gear, right? But there's a different mindset that they have going on. And as a result, since you kind of diverge those player bases a little bit more when it comes to gear progression, in my opinion, it seems like the changes they've been making to Mythic Plus has been that they feel more comfortable adding on more difficulty into these dungeons, just like how the raid devs are consistently making raids more challenging. And I think Nerebar Palace is a really good example of how the raids have gotten steadily more difficult over time. So while we're well into the season right now, I think what we're really going to be looking for is how the difficulty of dungeons continues to sort of branch out. And one of the largest levels of difficulty is just finding a group to begin with that can press their buttons well. And I think the more that you're having the continued sort of bloat with lots of cooldowns, lots of crowd control, lots of defensives, the wider...
Which is annoying, by the way. It is cool to have to interact with the characters outside of just doing brain deadly, doing your rotation and not thinking about anything. It is cool that you have to, from time to time, interrupt the stuff, maybe cast a CC or something. But right now, the focus is insane, brother. Like, from 10 casts I do or 10 keys I press, I have to press 2 one interrupt and one CC. And brother, I play a torrent and I have to even use my fucking war stomp, and somebody will say, yeah, you should have to use it or whatever. But having to proactively be thinking about using my war stomp as an interrupt is not fun. And what happens to the classes that don't have an interrupt like war stomp in their kit? Like, brother, this is insane. It has gotten out of hand, in my opinion. It is cool that this exists, that you have to interrupt and interact with the mobs, but it has gotten to a point that it is
of a range of players that you're really going to be experiencing. And it's also going to start, I believe, turning people off to the game when they start feeling like their progression gets stopped. Now,
exactly. There it is. He said it.
You might have an entire wide range of player base, and then, you have a fraction of people who are doing 15s and up right now, a little bit larger of a chunk here that's doing 12s, and then you kind of have like the rest of the player base. But what you forget is we're naturally increasing an item level every single week, probably for the next like month and a half, until people start getting close to BIS. And as a result, as people get closer to BIS, they're naturally going to progress further in towards 12s. But because the wall is going to be so high with doing 12s, the execution checks are going to be so high, it's going to be a real bear, I think, for a lot of players who want to have steady progression and to be able to continuously overcome things, which is a positive for having a slower gearing process. It's also going to be a negative if the wall itself is so large and the game doesn't do enough to really prepare you for what you're going to experience. For strong players, they're going to continuously look inwards, look towards their friends list, look towards networking.
He mentioned something in there that is important, but he didn't take it to the step that I was thinking he was going to take it, which is that the gap between the high end and the mid-low end is getting bigger and bigger because of the gearing. He's saying, oh, we are getting more gear. But the people that are getting more gear is the people that are already doing better content. And those people are going to look for people that also have more gear. So naturally, the player that has hit the wall, they stop there because they can't get better gear, because they can't get into higher keys. And now, since the other people are already going higher and higher, their chances of getting invited go lower and lower, so the gap gets bigger and it is even harder for them. It is insane, brother. I don't know why he didn't mention that, because he kind of went around that. WoW is so fun to play, but the systems and content suck so hard. There should be a bunch of 5-man raids like the Headless Hormans that give you real gear that goes up to Mythic difficulty. I would agree with that a 5-man, a 10-man. I have always thought about some bossing system. Like, I love raiding because I fight bosses, but raiding, you can only do it once a week, and it requires setting up a bunch of people because you need a lot of people. Mythic Plus is cool because you only need 5 people and you can spam it. But you don't focus on bosses, but in the whole dungeon and the route and the trash. I don't like fighting trash, I like fighting bosses. I want a middle ground. Somewhere when you can fight bosses and it's spammable and it is another way of endgame. And having it be 5-man or 10-man would be awesome because it also requires less planification. One boss raids would smooth out the experience so much. I agree completely with you, brother. A raid with just one boss, that is awesome. And they used to do it. They used to do that, or have 2 bosses. That was also cool, like one easy boss and one hard boss. And they just completely stopped doing that. I don't see how they couldn't do, for example, this raid has what? 8 bosses, 9 bosses, 8 bosses. They used to do raids like the Sepulture of the first one that has like 11 bosses. You could take 2 of those bosses, put them in another raid, and just have 8 or 9 bosses in here. You are already developing the same amount of bosses. So you can't say to me, no, that is too much work. Nah, it is not too much work, motherfucker.
And be less willing to take on unknown people. And for people trying to rise through the groups, well, there's just going to be less groups available doing those 12s, 13s, and onwards, in my opinion, than we've seen previously. That's probably my biggest concern, is that when they rise up with that difficulty, players are sort of adapting in a variety of different ways. And part of that is making sure you have really quality control checks as to who you're bringing in with your team, becoming more exclusive. And that's really where you've seen a lot of the issue with the invite protests that we had a couple weeks ago, was that people didn't feel like they were getting invited. Now, part of that
couple of weeks ago, I still see comments about that today, brother.
is definitely related to spec balance and how much damage specs do, where some specs are just absolutely crushing others, which naturally makes doing high keys significantly easier if you just kill off everything fast enough. You need less kicks, less defensives, all of that. But it also is going to be relating it to how willing are people to try new players out or try players out. When, hey, this one person has significantly higher eye level, okay, we're just going to be able to bring them in. We know what we're doing. Or people are just not going to be listing at all and then waiting for friends, waiting for network groups to be able to come on. And so, as I've been saying, the issue is really that they've made these affixes going into the new expansion to be more punishing and to force more precise gameplay upon people before they're...
So, he knows more about the game than me. We all know that. But in his opinion, the main problem with Mythic Plus right now are the new affixes. More importantly, the Challenger's Perils affix and the scaling difficulty and the way that you have to interact with the mobs, with the interrupts and the CC and all of that. I do believe this is an aspect. Of course, the Challenger's Perils is a big one. The difficulty curve is a big one. Like the way they restructure the keys, that now the keys are compressed and a 10 is what used to be a 20. That plays a role. But in my opinion, it is more that and the way that the progression is working. Like, you need a 10 now to get a mid-track gear, while you should need, like, before you needed like a 16 or a 17, so that would be like a 6 or 7 right now. So they completely changed that, and that makes it that progressing your character is harder because you are not getting access to that gear, and that gear allowed you to keep progressing your character even if you were stuck in keys. Right now, that is not the case, and I believe that is the main problem. Like the difficulty to get Gilded Crest and to get mid-track in the vault, that is stopping us from progressing our item level, and that stops us from getting invited to groups and all of that, and blah, 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 and it creates a weird environment. And when you couple that with what he's saying, with the difficulty and all that, you create a compounding effect that makes it hard. And again, this is not something that I just believe. You go and look in the Reddit, in Twitter, in Wowhead, in videos in YouTube, in comment sections. There are players that say, oh, this is fine, you are a pussy, get good. But this is like a percentage, and a small percentage. The vast majority of the player base are encountering that this Mythic Plus season is less fun than previous Mythic Plus seasons, and you can see content creators saying this too, high-end players saying this too. It is not an opinion, this is at this point a fact, because this is the perceived state of things by the whole community. This Mythic Plus season is the worst in a while, by far, and I know that Blizzard is probably learning for this, and they are probably going to fix a lot of stuff for the second season. My problem with that is, why not fix it now? Make it fun now, because a lot of people will get tired of the game and they will not come back for the second season. Make it good right now. You can do a hot fix, a hot patch, or whatever, and fix it now. It is not hard to do it, because even if the balance is hard to pull off, you can still get mid-track in 6 or 7 or whatever. You can still get more Gilded Crest. You can still do crazy stuff that is easy to pull off. That will help this season. Don't wait for season 2, because a lot of players will not return because they are tired of the game. I think making CC not count was a true interrupt, was a bad change in the Mythic Plus. Let's be honest, most people are pugging and in an uncoordinated setting, kicks overlap all the time. Exactly, that happens to me all the time. I do it all the time. I press my interrupt and somebody else interrupted and I wasted my interrupt. That happens all the time. I think if you do a kick and it doesn't interrupt anything, you should get like half of the cooldown back instantly. I agree with you. Mythics I do with kick versus runs, with missed kicks and night and day, man. Yeah. And what happens is also that there are stuff that you can't interrupt with an interrupt, and you have to use a hard CC. For example, like I said, there is stuff that I can't interrupt, but I do War Storm with the Torrent and I do interrupt it. Or Explosive Trap with the Hunter I play. I throw an Explosive Trap and I send the mob to there, and that interrupts it. But an actual interrupt wouldn't interrupt it. It is insane. The new tuning makes one miskick so punishing. Yeah, exactly.
You're going to be able to progress, but the game itself doesn't do much to teach you how to use these resources effectively. The difference between using a damage reduction cooldown before a hit, after a hit, in preparation of that damage is very, very different, and you know that firsthand as a healer. The amount of kicks, stops, interrupts required, and teaching people about how direct interrupts really are working, well, you need to use add-ons for these things. You need to use third-party resources to make sure you're tracking and understanding which of the mobs in 8 different dungeons are priorities, understanding what they do, the downsides of what they do, and it's incredibly brutal. It's a huge skill check for people going into it, and the game doesn't really teach you those things. So what should they be doing instead? Well, I really think, especially when it comes to interrupts, that they should be removing that direct interrupt where you need to actually use a wind shear, use a kick in order to stop a volley cast from going off, and that you should be able to use those AoE crowd control abilities.
Hey, he's saying exactly what you said, Rizzo. That you should be able to use a different thing that just the actual interrupt. You should be able to use CC. See, yeah, he said what you said, brother.
Once again, I think the crowd control has gotten really out of hand. The requirements have gotten really out of hand in dungeons, and the punishment is razor high when you're in these pub groups. You can't communicate all of these things unless you are in voice. A lot of players don't always want to get in voice, don't always want to communicate every single little thing that they're doing. They don't have that level of organization. And it very quickly becomes needed as you're doing dungeons past 12s. So sort of forcing it upon people makes it a lot harder. I don't really know why they don't have an affix which is actually accelerating the cast of mobs. Now hear me out, I know that sounds insane, but if you have a mob that has a cast time of 1.5 seconds, for example, why is it not like a 5-second cast at like keys below 6? And then at 6 it becomes what you would call the regular level of 1.5 seconds.
Hey, that is a cool idea that I hadn't thought about, and it is a good idea. Like, it makes it so that the difficulty curve affects other things and not only health and damage, because that is what happens in Mythic Plus right now. What changes with higher keys outside of affixes? Health and damage, health and damage, health and damage, health and damage. This will be another tuning knob, and it will also get people into the flow of interrupting and using CC and all of that. This is a good idea, brother. A good idea. Yeah, when I AoE stun and then they start casting a second later, that's not fun. Exactly. Because the interrupt makes it like, oh, you can cast for 5 seconds, 3 seconds, or whatever. This is cool. But a CC doesn't do that. So you interrupt the cast, but they just start it over again.
Why do we not have like insanely slow casts in earlier level dungeons to give people time to see like, oh, that mob is casting, oh, it might be lethal, oh, I have to take time? Because really, as players are learning, their reaction times are slower, they're distracted by other things, they're still learning their specs, they're still understanding what's going on, just having some beers and hanging out with friends. Why is that not actually allowing you to have a little bit more of an on-ramp? And they say, oh, okay, like, I don't know, past 6 or something, it's the regular sort of cast that they have going on. Better alerts or information really in the game itself to tell you about like the strengths or understanding of how you can use defensives. Because yeah, you could use a defensive like Astral Shift, which is a 40% damage reduction, but if you use it at a proper time, it's basically wasted, right? You know, you could mitigate half of a hit, or you can mitigate 1 or 2 dot ticks, but if you miss the rest of it, or you're already low health or something like that, it's really, really wasted. I think health in general needs to be a lot higher to give healers time to respond to what the burst damage is really doing to the dungeons. And I think we've already seen really big swings in overall healer output in just how you're playing one healer versus another. And that also plays a really big role in like how healer balance is going to be working, what sort of agency that healers have to heal through mistakes and make up for those mistakes that you can continue sort of progressing through those dungeons. I think what we have right now is a really like simple but brutal way of teaching people to play the game and to force upon them to get better. And for those who are not going to be as comfortable with it or don't have the time or desire to be going through lots of third-party sites and research and understanding all of this, because it's...
And WoW requires that, and that is one of the biggest criticisms that the game has had for a while now. that you have to use third-party stuff to even play the game. That it is insane, brother. It came out yesterday. Oh, I didn't know that, brother. I will have to check it out. Let me see the name. Like Brighter Waves or something like that. I will have to check it out, brother. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, my dude.
A freaking video game. It's crazy.
Exactly, it's a video game, not a job,
I don't
brother.
think that they need to just like chop it down to 5-button rotations by any means, but you have to admit that WoW has gotten incredibly bloated with all of these resources, and when they design around it, it becomes even more challenging for people to get on and learn. But hey, this is just my opinion throughout this video, so let me know what you guys think about. Also, like, what challenges have you been experiencing throughout this Mythic Plus season?
Well, I agree with what he said, but I also would put on top what I said, and those are the challenges that I have had. Like, progressing your character is a pain in the ass, and it makes it not fun, and it makes it so that you don't want to even play the game. Because being standing in town for an hour while you wait for an invite for a dungeon that gets bricked in the first pool, it is not fun to do that. It is not fun. No, make a group, make friends. I don't want to do that. I didn't have to do that in previous seasons.
What I've really seen so far is it seems like there's less groups willing to start posting up in LFG as they start progressing in dungeons, and I think that it's only going to get more and more exclusive, especially at keys over 12s, to find groups and find that sort of community, which makes WoW a great game to play. And having so much coordination needed in dungeons more than ever before, I think also makes it even harder for new people to start getting into the game and understanding the game, and keep having new players coming into the system to keep it vibrant and fresh. But let me know what you guys think. Thank you so much for watching, and huge love to our patrons who make all this content possible. If you'd like to join and get access to new videos, be sure to check it out in the description down below.
That was a cool video, Jack, brother. Thank you for the video. Thank you for the video. It prompted us to talk about cool stuff about the state that Mythic Plus is in. And of course, talk about this interrupt thing and about this easy thing that it is not mainly what I talk about when I talk about the problems with Mythic Plus. So it is good that you took me out of that realm because I always say the same stuff about it. So yes, it was a cool video, brother. Thank you.